New York City is home to some of the most exciting events and places in America.
It's also home to one of the most sobering events in American history.
Hello from Joshua and Alyssa. This is episode 80 of Around the World with Joshua and Alyssa, and we are glad that you would join us once again. We are going to look at New York City one more time. We have done that for the last 4 weeks, and we are going to end today by showing you the 9/11 Memorial and what it was like to be in New York City on September 11th during the 20th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. So here we go. This is the New York City skyline. We showed it to you before, but not quite this close up. On the far left is the One World Trade Center, also known as the Freedom Tower that we told you about last week. And just to the right of that is a big empty space where the Twin Towers once stood. So they were right there, and now that area will never be filled because there is a memorial at the base where the towers stood. So this is a picture of what now is there, where the two towers once were. This is actually the foundation of one of the towers. This here would be the South Tower. And what they did is they built this memorial up around the foundation. And we aren't showing you this now. Maybe another time we'll show you the 9/11 Memorial Museum, which goes underground where you can see the foundation from underground. But anyway, this is what it looks like. There are two of these identical squares at the memorial, and there's water falling down the side and into the middle. And then as you walk around the edge, all the names of those who died either in the towers or on the flights that crashed into the towers, or the firefighters or other first responders. Everyone who died has their name here on one of these squares. And the first time I went there, it was on September 12th, and this time we went on September 10th and 11th. And so I have not seen what is like rest of the year, but around this time it is covered in those flags and flowers and pictures and other things commemorating those who died. So here's just another picture of the flags. Here's a picture that Alyssa took with the flowers on one of the memorials. When we were there on the 10th, they had a special some kind of program honoring the firefighters, and so they were playing different songs, and one of them was Amazing Grace here on the bagpipes and the drums. On September 11th, I went as close as I could get to the memorial. They had it blocked off just for family, but I got as close as I could. And this is this was the fire station that was closest. In fact, it's just right across the street from the towers. And there is a memorial on the side of the building there, and they were doing different things to honor the firefighters and the first responders that morning. It was really neat because we saw first responders from all over the country. Here are some men from Milwaukee. Here are some from Chicago. Also in front of them is a guy from Colorado. And there were also people from Miami and Los Angeles and everywhere. They had all come for the 20th anniversary. This is looking back on the crowd from where I was standing. And then this was later in the day, after all the ceremonies were over and we could actually get back up close to the memorial again. You can see it is really crowded. This here would be the North Tower. And yeah, There's flowers all over, and it's just an incredible sight and really sad at the same time. At night, they shine these two lights up into the sky to represent the towers. And this was actually right outside our hotel room, which was really cool on the first night that we stayed there. So these aren't on the exact spot of the towers. These are about 2 blocks away on top of a parking garage. But they have been doing these, I think, every year since a year after the attacks, shining these up into the sky. So that is the 9/11 Memorial. I highly recommend that you go and see it. It's a significant part of American history. Not the only thing from 9/11. Of course, there was the attack on the Pentagon and also the plane that went down in Pennsylvania. But the main aspect of that day that people remember the most was the 2 towers and all the people who lost their lives there. And so it's a good history lesson to go there and to realize that it was real.
It's really interesting too because it's like the city is very full. There are lots and lots of buildings, like one right on top of each other. But then once you go to the area where the towers went down, it's a big open quiet space. Like you're standing there and you can see so much sky that you don't see through the rest of the city. So it's a good reminder too of things that were there that aren't there anymore. Even just the thought of like how quickly something can change in life. It's not there permanently, forever and ever. And we know God's even in control, even when things like that don't make sense, like buildings getting knocked over and lots of people losing their lives. Somehow it's part of God's plan. So as Christians, we can look at it even a little bit different than everybody else, but still want to take time to reflect and remember and not want to see that happen again. So we have the last part of our missionary story today.
Okay.
And see if we can keep track of pictures again. So we ended our story last time with John going on a trip to go see if they could actually go to that new town of Qingde. And Betty was staying back with their new baby, Helen, and her mom had come to help them for a little bit. So John walked back in the room just as Betty was changing Helen again, and he scooped her up and gave her a big hug and said, "Well, Betty, guess what? We can move to our new village of Qingde whenever we're ready. So when do you think we'll be ready?" Betty was really excited. "Really? Well, let's go back to our last mission place and pack up our last things and then let's go. Do you think we can leave like within a couple weeks?" And Betty said yes. She was really excited. They were finally going to go to their own mission. So they went back to the city where that school had been, and of course they had to show off their new baby to everyone and all their friends, and they packed up their belongings, and with their cook and another house helper, they packed up their stuff and started that long journey once again through the mountains to get to their new home in Qingde. This time, Betty and Helen were riding in like the little chair through the villages. Just like before, every time they got to a village and took time to rest, then John would go around and hand out tracts and start talking to people. When they finally got to the last hill overlooking their new city, John and Betty were just so happy and so thankful. God had finally brought them to their own mission, to their own place to be, and they couldn't wait to see how God was going to use them in the city. So they made it into the city and to the house that they were going to stay in, that the last missionaries had helped them kind of figure out a place to stay. And John said, "Well, I think I need to go out right away and I need to talk to the leader of the city, the magistrate. I need to let him know that we're here and then start telling people that we're going to have a meeting on Sunday." But he said, "Yeah, that'll be great. And then we'll have to do some other classes and some other things to connect with the people." And they were both so excited, had so many ideas in their mind. So they put up their signs and everything for their first Sunday, but the sad thing was only 2 people showed up. But they decided they weren't going to be discouraged, and so they opened their chapel space a few more times during the week, and people just kind of were curious. So they just came in, and the women always wanted to see baby Helen, and so Betty always talked to them very kindly. They wanted to ask about her clothes and all sorts of things, and Betty used it as a chance to change the conversation back to talking about God. and how God had made her. And the men would want to talk with John too, and he would spend time reading things out of the Bible, and they would talk about it together. So little by little, they began to get to know the people in the village. And John said, I've been thinking, I think in like another week or so, I'd like to go to another city, to Mingday, and I'd like to go with a couple other missionaries over there and do some evangelistic meetings. And Betty said, well, do you think it's safe with, the communists around and everything? Do you think it'll be safe for you to go that far away from our village? And he said, I think so. There's been rumors that the communists are around, but we always have rumors, so we don't really know if they're true or not. But I will just keep listening and asking around first before anything. So a couple days later, Betty was giving Helen a bath. There's their cook and one of their house helpers. And John came running in. He said, this is the second messenger I've received from the magistrate. And this messenger is saying that the communists are coming, that there are thousands of them, and they're only 4 miles away from our city. But he said, do you think it's true? Do you think they really are coming? John said, I don't know. It seems like there's mixed messages all the time. I'm going to see if I can find out. And he said, anyways, why don't you guys start preparing like we're going to leave? So the cook and the house helper started to gather some things together. And Betty got some things together even for baby Helen. She got some diapers and kind of put them in a little pack that she zipped up. And she even pinned some money to the front of Helen's clothes and then zipped up her little outfit around it. And John came back and he said, I think we probably should get ready to leave. So they started gathering a few things, and just a few minutes later, they heard some gunshots and a lot of shouting. And he told their helpers to go lock the gate, and then everybody would come inside and pray. And just within a few minutes, they could hear all those soldiers in the street, right outside their door, all the way up to their door, pounding on it. And John opened the door and very calmly let in the soldiers. And they said, we want all of your money. So John and Betty gave them all the money that they had. And they wanted more, and so they started looking through the house till they could find anything else, and then they took John and Betty and baby Helen as their prisoners and marched them off to a prison in the village. And a little bit later in the day, they brought John back so he could gather some food and things for baby Helen. And the housekeeper said, well, what are we going to do? The soldiers are taking everything. And John said, it's okay. God will provide. It's fine, we'll just watch and see what God does. And the soldiers were going through the city and looting and just taking whatever they wanted. But he decided he should probably send a letter to their headquarters of their mission board. And so this is the letter that he sent. Dear leaders of the China Inland Mission of Shanghai, my wife, baby, and myself are today in the hands of the communists in the city of Qingdai. Their demand is $20,000 for our release. That's a lot of money back in 1934. Like, that's a lot of money today, but a lot of money back then. All our possessions and stores are in their hands, but we praise God for peace in our hearts and a meal tonight. God grant you wisdom in what you do, and us fortitude, courage, and peace of heart. He is able and a wonderful friend in such a time. Things happened so quickly this morning. They were in the city in just a few hours after ever-persistent rumors really becoming alarming, so we couldn't have time to prepare to leave in time. We were just too late. The Lord bless and guide you, and as for us, may God be glorified, whether by life or by death. In him, John Stam. And about 4 o'clock that next morning, the soldiers got them up and started them marching on their way to the next town. Long walk with John carrying Helen. So once they got to the next town over, the communist soldiers shoved them into a post office building while they went through the town to do some more looting. And the post officer in charge said, well, where are you going? Where are they taking you? And John smiled. He said, well, we know where we're going. We're going to heaven. Well, that wasn't exactly the postman's question, but it was a really good answer. And John said, I don't know where they're going to take us, but we do know where someday we will go, and that's to heaven. And the postman was really intrigued by how calm these people were, even though they were in a really bad position. So he brought them some food, and he said, is there anything else I can do for you or get for you? And John said, well, can I write one more letter, and can you deliver it to my mission? So John had a chance to write one more letter, and then it was delivered on to their mission. So that night, the soldiers took them to an old abandoned house kind of on the outside of the village, and that's where they slept. And early the next morning, the soldiers came in for John and Betty, and they bound their hands together and walked them into the middle of the village. And they didn't know exactly what was going to happen. And once they got to the middle of the village, John turned to talk to one of the soldiers. The soldier told him to kneel, and John lost his life that day. And Betty was standing right next to him, and right after that, Betty lost her life as well. And then the soldier just marched out and left the city. But the people of the city, other Christians, had heard that there had been rumors of foreigners that had gotten captured. And so some of the evangelists and the Christians of the area said, well, I really hope it's not the Stamps. I'm sure that they heard about the soldiers coming and got out before anything happened. But then reports came in that 2 foreigners had been killed in the streets, and eventually they were identified as the Stamps. And so the evangelists and missionaries of that village said, well, that's just so awful, but what's happened to the baby? So they went searching through. Once it got dark, they found the old abandoned house, and they found baby Helen inside. So these were the missionaries that John was going to be working with, the missionaries and evangelists that he wanted to work with from this next village over. So they heard about it, and they were really sad at what had happened to John and Betty, but they knew it was their job now to take care of baby Helen. So the next morning, they found John and Helen's bodies, and they put them in a coffin, and the people of the village gathered around. Now, by this point, the soldiers had mostly left, and the people of the village gathered around, and it gave the evangelists and the missionaries an opportunity to say these people died, and they died because they loved the Lord Jesus Christ, and they loved his message, and they weren't scared, and they know where they're going to be forever and ever in heaven. Well, after that, the missionary and the evangelists, they were Chinese people, also had a baby, and so they took their baby and the Stamps baby, and they kind of balanced them in a little basket and began walking a long, long way where they knew the nearest hospital would be, and they searched for food in each village that they stopped in, and with the money that had been pinned to Helen's clothes, they were able to pay people as they traveled all the way back to the big city, which was closer to where Betty's family was. So then once they made it to the city, they were able to get Helen back to her grandparents, and then her grandparents were able to take care of her and raise her as she grew up. Now, the story of what had happened to John and Betty traveled obviously back to the United States and to schools, and their school, Moody Bible Institute, had a special time to remember John and Betty, like a special service. And at that service, lots of the students attended from the college, and 500 students decided that they wanted to give their lives for Christ like John and Betty had. And so 500 of those students decided they wanted to be missionaries or servants for God somewhere around the world, just because of how God had used John and Betty. And then at another college nearby, at Wheaton College, they did the same thing. They had a special service to remember the life of John and Betty, and 200 students from that school also decided they wanted to follow Christ, even though it's difficult. And they had heard what had happened to John and Betty, but they still wanted to be missionaries too. So their story, even though it had kind of a sad twist to it, God still used it for good. And a lot of times, we don't always think that things are turning out for the good, but it reminds me a lot of the story of Joseph. Lots of things looked bad in the life of Joseph, but he talks about how God meant it for good. Even his brothers tried some terrible things, and he saw God was going to use it for their good. The same thing with John and Betty. They gave up their lives because they loved the people of China, and they thought it was important to share the good news of the gospel with those people, and they did it all the way up until their death. But God used it as an amazing way to bring so many more people to be missionaries in China and around the world. So that is our story of John and Betty Stamp.
A lot of sad things today, but lots of lessons to be learned, and a lot of good things that you shared. Okay, we are going to look at some people that we have looked at the last 4 weeks, missionaries, and they are all from Missionary Acres, and that is because my sister, Jeanette, was able to get them for us. And so we're going to start with Jeanette. She just moved down there about a month ago to serve the residents of Missionary Acres down there. A lot of pastors, families, and missionaries who have served faithfully and are now retired. And so Jeanette asked for prayer for strength to be able to help the residents and to attend to their various needs, to be an encouragement to them, and also for her own health and strength. We looked at Betty Walden and her ministry in Brazil, in Fortaleza, working at the academy there and helping with various churches. And also, she is now married to Ed Walden, who was at Missionary Acres when she came there, and together they have served for 12 years there. And so strength for them is also their prayer request, as especially for her, she has various health issues, but she's thankful for all that God has allowed her to do despite that. And so she had a praise that God was able to work through her despite everything that she has had to deal with, especially in recent years. Jack and Doris, who served in Jamaica, and this is an older picture of them. They served there shortly after World War II because he was stationed there, and then God gave him a burden for ministry there. And Doris turns 100 in about 5 months. And so a special prayer request there is that she'd be able to live until that time, and that her family would then get to celebrate her 100th birthday with her. And finally, we looked last week at Jim and Becky's story, who first were serving in different places. She was in Scotland while he was in Jamaica with his family before his first wife died. And then Becky joined him in Jamaica, and then they went to Scotland, and then they went to Canada, and finally to the U.S., and then settled down at Missionary Acres. And so pray for them as they are serving there and trying to reach out in their community and the people there, but also they also have health needs. I guess that happens as you get older. You just have more and more health issues come up, but each of these people are still faithful in what God has given them, and so we want to praise God for that, thank him for how he used them in the past, and pray that he would still be able to work through them in these coming days.
Yep. Thanks so much for watching with us. Make sure you come back next time to hear a new missionary story and a new update from somebody around the world and a new place too. All the new things.
Yep. Not sure what we're going to cover next, but it'll be good. We will see you later. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.